Hey guys, just gonna run through one of my first dungeon experiences in Midnight here in Murder Row, the first accessible dungeon. Gonna be playing Stormbringer with the build on screen, and I'll add a separate video with Totemic to go with it, so you can get a good feel for how they differ. Big asterisk here is the play is far from pristine, and you're welcome to flame me about it. There will be logs in the description, and I'm still feeling things out. Either way, I'll just be talking over the footage, and I hope it gives an impression of what the gameplay looks like relative to your live experience, so let's get underway. So the first thing really kind of is, as you can probably see, the UI is a bit weird. Like, I've been playing with the same UI since Cataclysm, so it's pretty strange to get adjusted to how things are going. Like, you can see on screen, tracking Maelstrom with only one buff bar with stacks on is pretty rough. I'm definitely finding it a bit weird to adjust to that. And hopefully they come up with something. I'd like to see, like, combo points or a bar, or just basically anything that gives me more information than simply this is that you have a stack present and how many it is. Well, look a little deeper. I don't like that at all. Finding queues for these dungeons as well right now is a bit awkward, so I'd really like to see them invite more people, because I'd just like to get stuck in to trying these dungeons as much as possible instead of having like an hour-long queue time just to go through things. Anyway, like, this is just a normal dungeon, so before it, like, gets anywhere underway, it's probably worth knowing that all the defensive and CC utility pruning, it's not that noticeable yet, for obvious reasons, because, like, in normal, there's nothing that's really threatening, and without sort of playing the dungeons enough, it's hard to really know what's super threatening. Occasionally, there's, like, really big scary casts going on that does nothing, but when you get into like Mythic Plus environments, you kind of very quickly learn what you aren't supposed to do, or like what you can't get away with, so that's not there, and that's probably a factor that will continue to be grown upon as the alpha goes on, but it's nearly impossible to get a proper feel for that with the content that we've got right now. You can see that, like, the cooldown pacing for the spec is, I think, better than live. The burst during Doomwinds is easily as good as on live when you go into Ascendance, except you have it every minute now. The main difference in how it feels is you have to play quite well inside that very fast window to make sure that you don't run out of Crash and Stormstrike buttons, and you have to kind of know based on the cadence, which is another thing that the UI would really help if it was better. You have to know that I'm not going to spend enough with the next Stormstrike or Crash to get the cooldown reduction from Elemental Tempo to continue with another Stormstrike, and if that happens and you don't get a Crash proc, or in some cases you didn't pull one, because I think that might still be a component now, you're going to have to press something that doesn't activate Doomwinds, which does kind of suck, which is the one thing that Ascendance doesn't have. When you're in Ascendance, you are guaranteed the whole time you'll be able to press something that triggers it. So that might be the reason that you pick that talent, but right now I'm hoping that we still have the option of being like the 1 minute guy that can just pop off really frequently, do big damage, convert to AoE immediately, while still doing really good priority damage. And the other thing is that I think there's definitely something to be said about the whole Sundering P-Wave swap over. Primordial Wave is, in a lot of cases, a pretty contentious ability. I think it's got better over the course of War Within, but it has set up at least 2 globals to get it set up, unless you have a Voltaic proc beforehand, which technically they fixed, but that's an aside. You need those flame shocks up, then you need to Primordial Wave on the targets, and then you get to do the damage. Sundering, just, you press it, you get your Maelstrom, you go. You've got your haste, and you're away. Like, in one global. In some cases, you can also have Doomins up immediately as well, because it's off GCD. But it's not like there was nothing lost in that process. Not having, for particular, Stormbringer, which is here, having no way to immediately set up all of those lightning rods on the whole pack is really noticeable. Like, lightning rod uptime isn't bad now. I think it's actually pretty good. Mostly because Ride the Lightning carries it a lot for Stormbringer. Every single strike is going to put up some form of lightning rod on something, be it your main target or bouncing to cleave with the smart targeting. And then when you pair that in cooldowns, you're also using Thoriums. So that means that every strike is putting up at least 2, if not 3, if you've got Arc Discharge procs, debuffs onto targets. So you're pretty quickly blanketing everything. You can see, like, here on a boss, it's pretty noticeable that you do a lot of burst. It's kind of hard to, like, get it across because there's no damage meter yet, although there's logs there you can go and check. But once the boss starts, you just go. And all of your damage sort of shits out immediately. You've got Sundering to haste it. You've got Doomwinds to just off GCD everything. Your Maelstrom gen shoots to the top, and you're just ready to go. Kind of similar to on live with Ascendance, although it's every minute. But Ascendance still has a bit of thought of to, like, all the things that you get ready and line up before you get to do the big blow-up damage. The other thing as well is, like, here we had Lust, and there was also a bonus event item that gives you haste when you use it. So this is a bit more representative of, like, what the flow will be like when we have real gear. Because on here I have, like, I think 20% haste at a push, probably closer to, like, 15, which is not what you really want. And lower mastery, so lower storm surges, wind fury, yada yada, all the things that sort of, like, slow us down from being at the start of expansion, that's all sort of here. So I'm not that worried about the speed, the pace, because I have seen quite a few people comment that they think that it looks really slow in gameplay. Bear in mind that if you go on live and you, like, level up a character and you're at rock bottom gear, that looks really slow too. And that's obviously not the case once you get geared. It really cranks up. And I think there's room in what we have here to do that again. It's going to slow down a bit here. We had to wait for the guy from the group finder to work out that he needed to come upstairs before this mini event starts. But yeah, the instant setup, I think, is as much of a benefit as losing the Primordial Wave Lightning Rod thing is a loss. So that's almost a wash. But I think in, like, some bosses, some mechanics, like I noticed on Dimensius on retail, having to set up everything before you get to Ascendance and go on the Living Mass at the beginning, those GCDs actually really matter. And having those pulled out and have everything just come at once might end up just washing out the extra benefit of what Primordial World does. I think one thing that is super important to get across from this video, but, like, that I didn't quite make clear in the other one, them making Elemental Assault only 1 point to invest to basically fix your Maelstrom gen, plus having lightning strikes, it means that when you build for a dungeon or an AoE encounter or anything like that, there is none of that compromise anymore of, instead of it just being like the problem that specs have, where they have to overinvest into purely AoE or overinvest into purely single target. Our case, I feel like, was a lot worse because it wasn't just that your numbers were low, it felt like you were giving up something really big because suddenly your resource becomes unreliable. And now that you can always just get Elemental Assault to fix that, it means that despite having AoE talents here, not that there's a lot of variance in the talent options because we're limited on points available, but even though I've intentionally picked more AoE choices, when I'm in single target, I don't feel like I've made a compromise. It still feels like I'm playing a build that's entirely competent in single target. And fixing that was something that I'd been begging for since the start of the War Within. And I personally really notice when I've only got 1 point in Elemental Assault. I obviously super notice when I've not got any. So being able to just pick it and not have that pressure of, oh dear, if I pick 2 points in this to make the rotation feel proper, I'm going to lose Thoriums or Primordial Storm, which is a non-negotiable on retail. So that part I am insanely happy about. them doing. I'll say here, I do think that the whole pooling potential thing hasn't gone away, and I'm unsure how happy I am about that. Like, holding Tempest between packs, because it does a lot of damage, like 2, 3, 4 times the damage that other abilities do on its own, straight up front. Just like live, it is the big button that carries Stormbringer. Having that 30-second limitation on it, feeling pressured to sort of tell whoever's pulling to, like, we need to go, I've got my big moment ready, we can't let it fall off. That still being there might get old, still being there. I'm not sure whether it'd just be better to make it infinite duration so we can just carry it around and then we just press it when we press it, or giving us a way to guaranteeably activate it the moment we enter a pack if it's the first time in combat. I've said that before, like with Killing Strikes for Feral and Ravager with Druid of the Claw. I think now that Tempest isn't doing Rolling Thunder, there's probably room to make that work on at least one of the talents, because some of them are a bit pointless now. And by extension, with the pooling, the Apex talent almost certainly right now has that same influence. You can bank up 2 stacks of that buff. You've only got 20 seconds to spend them, but if you open on a pack with Crash, Crash, Crash and get 3 stacks, then that means every strike after it is, even though it's splitting and not doing full AoE, doing a lot of damage. It's guaranteeing that you've got that up from Maelstrom gen to like dump into your abilities, or even stronger if you Doom Winds, Crash, 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 you do all your spenders as well, and you just suddenly opened on a pack, dumped a lot of Maelstrom, potentially got even more Crash resets, and you do horrendous levels of burst. It feels really good, but the good feeling when you do the thing is pretty heavily offset by the fact that you just spent the last 10-15 seconds not pressing the button you really want to press so you can pull it up and hopefully making it to the next pack to dump them. So there's probably something there that it would be a compromise on skill expression of being able to do the thing versus is it too complicated and too punishing if you don't do the thing, which is entirely subjective. It's just something that I definitely noticed when I was doing dungeons. I think the flow of the rotation is another thing that keeps coming up. I tried to get this through in the gameplay video, but in both single target and in AoE, I think it flows really close to exactly the same as live, with the exception of strikes now actually mesh in once you go into cleave and AoE, without feeling like I'm pressing this because I haven't got the other buttons that I actually care about available. Because they always guarantee your Maelstrom, and they're still proccing Crash, which is still generating more Maelstrom in AoE, even though it's splitting, it still scales upward. They still contribute quite a lot, and although they probably need to get the numbers right between them, the big thing is that Ride the Lightning being there, it carries so much now in the way that strikes feel, because that means that your Storm Strike is putting Lightning Rod up, even Lava Lash is contributing because it's sending out the Chain Lightning too. And it also means that the moment that a second target comes in, even when you're doing single target, you just immediately start being a cleave guy. There's no setup or adjustment to, I now want to do the cleave. You've always just got some cleave going on, and all you're waiting for is the target to come in to take advantage of that. And having that, once again, a huge advantage, being a spec that can hybridize between single target and AoE, and being one that doesn't have any gameplay considerations to forcibly turn it on, is a really big deal, I think. From like a meta standpoint, it's an advantage to have that isn't always noticed. Like the same advantage that we had in the War Within in at least one of the seasons, where being able to flip specs between damage profiles on fights or in dungeon types or anything like that that's something that is a bit more ancillary, and people don't necessarily realize how good that is until they come into a situation where suddenly this fight specifically wants burst every 30 seconds, and oh, one of our hero talents can do that, we can swap, we can carry the phase. It's one of those benefits that is really easy to overlook, but is definitely important. I mentioned as well, I'm erring a lot here, the Maelstrom weapon generation from Crash Lightning splashes coming from strikes, that splitting so it limits to 5 targets, that still scales up in AoE. So once you hit AoE, you still have the exact same thing that we have on live, where when you're in AoE, you know about it because your resource is suddenly everywhere. You're not struggling to find any. You're not in any kind of limbo of, I can't spend enough to cycle like I want to. You immediately know you've got loads of resource. You can cycle really fast. It leads to faster tempests because you're spending more naturally. It makes Doomwinds really explosive because you're always sending out 10 stack chains instead of like barely reaching the 5 with Lightning Bolt. So that part hasn't been lost either. Where I think a fair bit of the confusion comes from is we have quite a few talents now that are pulling double duty versus our retail ones. We had, in some cases, what one talent did combined into one talent doing what that did plus 2 others instead. So Voltaic Blaze is a really good example. That's effectively doing what Voltaic Blaze did, what Ice Strike did, and what Hailstorm did, all in one go. And having that there, the condensation of effects into one button, it makes it look like you're not playing a spec with that's as complicated anymore, but it doesn't mean that those effects went away. They just sort of melded into one thing that makes it clear, this button does all of these things, it's good at this, use it like you'd use it otherwise. I've been super sort of glazy with the way that all this is here, but there is a few factors that I think you definitely would want to know about as early as possible. There is still a lot of RNG in Stormbringer specifically. It's just moved where the RNG is. Like on live, you've got the same sort of RNG going on with Awakening Storms procs, and in particular the tier set going on. It's probably almost as extreme on here as those, except instead it's been entirely shifted into just Tempest random procs. Not as bad because Rolling Thunder isn't there to make it explosive and important on momentum, but it's still there. And the Apex Talents procs, it's really, really valuable to have those condense up and stack, because it means that each of those strikes suddenly is doing even more, is doing double duty on the procs from the crashes. In the same way that Rolling Thunder had the momentum thing going on, and you really wanted to sort of chain them all together to stack the dogs up, that's still going on here. And those procs are very few. They're either few and far between, or they're all at once. And there's not really a lot you can do to be like, give me the procs right now. Either way, like, that's a whole lot of yapping for just one dungeon, because I've just been going over it as the footage goes. But, like, this is the last boss here, you'll see, with Bloodlust, and we go, and suddenly the boss is just... It's really hard to see without the damage meter being implemented, but, like, in the logs here, a lot of the boss's health disappearing is coming from me and the extremely overtuned numbers on Devourer right now. And the boss just disappears. Once ads come in, suddenly, bam, like, there was no setup, there was no getting adjusted to it. The ads just die. And that's just from hitting single target buttons. So you can see the DNA of how Enhancement plays, I think, is 1,000,000% still there. It's more complicated than the first iteration of this rework, which came in Shadowlands, for anyone who remembers. More complicated than that. It's less complicated than the War Within, obviously. I think it has the potential to probably settle a little around the lower end of Dragonflight, which is pretty good, hopefully. But I'm not here to sort of convert the masses. If someone has seen this and they don't like it, or they think that the spec's lost, you're entitled to that. And I'm obviously a little bit biased because this is new stuff that I'm seeing and I'm excited about it, but it might go completely wrong on the other end. I think that having a bit of simplification, probably for the best. Anyway, I've yapped through an entire dungeon and probably annoyed way too many of you with just like my stream of consciousness. So I'll end it here. Hopefully I'll have a totemic one once the alpha servers are back up and the queues aren't as long. And hopefully they send out another invite wave so I can not only see you then, but also see you in the dungeons.